Welcome back to Amazin But True, a New York Mets podcast from the New York Post. I'm your host, Jake Brown. I never went to therapy really growing up. We might have went as a family once, but this program is going to have to become a free therapy session for listeners because the New York Mets in 2023 right now are one of the most underachieving teams in the history of the sport. And you can call that hyperbole, you can call that exaggeration. It is not. This is a $350 million team that as we head into summer, the summer has begun today. We're recording this on June 21st. Summer is here. The days are longer, and boy, did it feel longer watching the Mets on Wednesday in Houston. And as the summer is here, the New York Mets enter summer 34-40. That's 74 games in. That means the Mets have 88 games remaining in this season, in this disappointing season. They are just a week away from the first half of the season being over, and they are currently 6.5 games out of the third wild card, not the division, a team that was within 4 games of the division. What felt like just a few short weeks ago is now 6.5 out of a wild card spot. To even utter the word division is almost a disservice to everyone else in it. They are 13.5 games back of the Braves. They are 4.5 games back of the third place Phillies. They are 7.5 games back of the second place Marlins. I mean, they're closer to last place than they are the third wild card. They're just 6 ahead of the last place Nationals. And just more utterly bad baseball on Wednesday. I mean, they got to be the first team in the history of the baseball to, one, not only load the bases twice in one inning, but have one of those loaded bases not even advance the runners. They had to go back because Pete Alonso was running towards the pitcher. It's like, he hurt his wrist and he forgot to run at first base. He gets called for a violation. They load the bases again. Astros get out of it. On top of that, on top of a base runner interference on Alonso in the bottom of the inning, they get a catcher interference on Narvaez, who later in the game has a pitch clock strikeout. In the same inning, you throw 2 wild pitches. This has become, and currently has been in the month of June swoon, the circus. And it's painful to watch as a Mets fan. Like if you got through that 9 innings Wednesday, God bless you. A 3.5-hour game, a comedy of errors. I mean, Alonso check swing double play. I mean, that is just insanity. How about this stat? The 2023 Mets are 13-11 when scoring 6+ runs in a game. Last year, 55-4. They've already tripled their loss amount this year. And of course, they lose a series where Daniel Vogelbach becomes a Hall of Fame. I mean, Vogie's back. 7 for 17, 412, 2 homers, 7 RBIs. Are you kidding me? I mean, I guess we got to cut him a break here on the show now because he showed up. Maybe that week off actually did help him. But everything going wrong A to Z on this team. To the point, guys, we're in the middle of the night. I went to go pee, and I had my Howie Rose bobblehead on the corner of a desk. And as last week or a week before, I think I stubbed my toe in the corner of the bed. What's happening in the middle of the night? I mean, what's happening in the middle of my dreams? This symbolizes the Mets season. My Howie Rose bobblehead has been decapitated. This is it. This is the Mets season. My what could have been father back in the 80s when he, got my mom's number at that Toyota dealership, called her a few weeks too late, is now headless in Seattle. And the Mets might not have any players in Seattle in the All-Star game in a few weeks. So if you got super glue, send it to Astoria. But this is the thumbnail right here. No Howie Rose head. The Mets have no head and no heart right now. And I said Buck Showalter is going to last the season. I think he will. But there's a case for Buck Showalter being fired. I don't think it's going to happen, but I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world if in a couple of weeks the team keeps playing like this, if he was, because this is unacceptable baseball across the board. So let's talk about it with Casey Stern. All right, you heard me commiserate there to open up Amazin But True about this, horrible team, this lackluster baseball that we saw once again in Houston, from catcher interferences to baseline interference, pitch clock violation, strikeouts, errors, bad pitching, injuries, with Josh Walker getting hurt and having to leave the game. Jeff McNeil, I thought he broke his knee when he hit that ball off his knee. Somehow he stayed in the game, but already had a bruise. So let's commiserate some more with Casey Stern of the Unfiltered podcast. Follow him on Twitter at Casey Stern. You have seen him on MLB. You've been on what? MLB Network, NBA TV, TBS, TNT. Used to do a podcast, Mets.com. My producer
long
here,
in the way back when. Oh yeah,
my producer here, Andrew Hart, worked MLB. He was there with you guys for a while, and I was at MLB. So good to come have you on the show. How you doing, Casey?
Pleasure, Jake. Happy to come on. I wish it was better circumstances, but this will be therapy for all of us.
Yeah, that's what I called at the beginning of the show. I said I may have went to family therapy once in my life. I know people advise it, but I'm just going to turn this into a therapy. I'm just going to let out my thoughts. And in a month, they might not be Mets thoughts. They might just be life thoughts because the games might get so irrelevant. I mean, Casey, this team is 6 games under 500 with the team, that money could buy, $350 million. And just playing really bad baseball, unwatchable baseball. Like, I'm forced to watch it for this show, but I might need like a replacement host for a month and take a beach vacation because this is unwatchable baseball.
Look, there's a lot not to like. I think one thing we have to remember, and you kind of got to separate the two, the brand of baseball with all the mistakes they're making, terrible. The fact that this team clearly seems to have some kind of a symptomatic problem getting its head on straight is an issue. But the biggest problem are guys not performing. Biggest problem is, and not specifically this game, but when you look overall, if Verlander and Scherzer and Senga, and then I give you McNeil, no order, McNeil, Marte, Lindor, Alonso, and whatever group you want to use of the hitters, right? Do what they're supposed to do. This team would have a much better record than it has. You look at who's in the game today: Young, Walker. You got kids who have been in second appearance, right? Outside of Ottavino, even McGill, let's be fair, and I know he's good his last start, none of these guys are good enough. They're not. They're not players that would be in a roster in a game against the Astros in some big game in, let's say, a World Series, or against the Braves in September, like this team was in a year ago when it mattered. The players right now and the roster right now isn't performing the way it's supposed to be, but it's also not good enough. And I know everybody's going to get on Buck and let's fire this guy, fire that guy. If everybody performed the way they're supposed to in the back of the baseball card, this wouldn't happen. Is it disconcerting they make so many mistakes? Of course. You want to put that on the manager? I think leadership in the room, for sure. All of that, yes. But the bigger problem is dudes who are being paid to do what they're supposed to do and what they're talented enough to aren't coming through. That's the biggest issue.
I was never on the Buck firing train, but I'm starting to get closer just because of it just doesn't feel like they're playing for him like last year. I don't think he'll be fired now. I don't think he'll be fired by the All-Star break. But if mid-August comes around and this team is, say, 15 games under 500, I mean, I guess you just keep him at that point. But he's not making a great case to be back in 2024, Casey.
Yeah, so I'm on the other side of this from this standpoint. And I get, look, I'm as big a Met fan as anybody. I'm in my mid-40s. I've lived all the pain. I get it, right? But what we don't understand stepping outside of it is how could the same dude who was as big a reason as anybody that you won over 100 games then be the problem? It doesn't make sense. We have to step out of Mets land where we've all been diverted to this island of disaster and depression our whole lives. And we have to get to some sort of common sense. The guy who, let's say, running a company, in this case, a team, can't be the biggest reason or as big as any that you're up here, and then he's as big a reason you're – it just doesn't work. The accountability has to go on the players. The accountability has to go on the roster. Everyone is at fault. Buck's at fault. Billy Eppler for the roster not being deep enough. guys for not performing. The fact that outside of really, look, the Scherzer outing, you could go back to a couple of days ago. Let's go back to a week ago during the Subway Series. He blowing a 5-1 lead. That's not Buck's fault. Was it Buck's fault Scherzer gave up 7 runs against the Padres a year ago? Or Chris Bassett, crapped the bed too in that series? No, of course not. So to me, there's a part of this because of the way they're playing, Jake, that absolutely has to fall on a manager because that's part of his job. But we have to go down and dumb it down to this simple fact. If you are a person watching or listening who thinks Buck was a big reason they won 101 games, you cannot then turn around and say he's a big reason they're here. In both cases, you have to realize the accountability falls on the players. For the most part, it does.
Yeah, and this whole year I've been blaming a lot more so on Billy Eppler because, like you said, who are these guys coming in? I mean, Dominic Leone off the scrap heap, 7th president of the United States, Grant Hartwig. I mean, he was in the Battle of Hastings, as intern Nick taught me last week, Battle of Hastings in the 1000s. I mean, Josh Walker, who just got called up a few weeks ago, and then finally you had a big leaguer in Adam Ottavino, I'm still mad he was in the other day after David Robertson just threw 8 pitches. But he's underachieved this year. McGill was terrible, and you're going to have to either keep throwing him out there or, give Joey Lucchesi a few starts until Quintana's back, at some point here in July as he's a couple of rehab starts in. But he was not ready for Edwin Diaz to go down. I mean, that trickle-down effect, it's showing more and more that Edwin Diaz was the team MVP because from top to bottom, Casey, this bullpen is an atrocity. And like you said, when the starters aren't getting to the 4th, 5th, 6th inning, it's deep doo-doo for the Mets. They're 3-6 in Justin Verlander starts this year. They haven't been good in Scherzer starts. Senga's a hit or miss. He's been inconsistent. 1 through 5, these starters, it is a concern because it just drops down to the 4th inning guy, the 5th inning guy, 6th inning guy. There's no one outside of David Robertson that you've been able to trust.
No, and you want to blame, not you, but we all want to find who's at fault because it's like some culprit. We're going to fix some piece in a jigsaw puzzle and everything else falls into place. It doesn't work that way, right? Even the Vogelbach thing that everybody got on at the time, mental break, why the hell's he on the team? I heard a lot of that. Now it's, maybe that was a good idea. Good for him with the fortitude. Everybody loved the Senga move. Now he's hit, and you're not wrong, but now he's hit or miss. Everybody loved Scherzer being on the team, and nobody asked him to give up 7 runs the end of last season and not look anything but old most of this year either, right? We love the Verlander. We love that he didn't give DeGrom 5 years. We love all that. So at the end of the day, we are all at fault for thinking this team and this roster was better than it is. That's number one. Number two, clearly they have an issue in terms of, look, I mentioned it and somebody brought it up in a tweet before I came on with you. And I'm with this. And this is where I got to check myself. And I try and think, okay, am I being a little bit too serious? I'm going to go real old school. I love Alvarez. The fact that he was laughing at the plate with Maldonado, I get it. They're both catchers. I get it's a great moment and all that kind of stuff. Let the kids play. I'm all about that. I am not one of these people who is not. But in that moment, when you got people in the dugout who are the veterans who look as dejected as they do because of what that moment is, you didn't play in this game when the only thing I want you caring about is playing in this damn game and wanting to play every day. We understand he played the first 2 games in the series. I don't want to see you laughing down 2 runs when that team's about to lose another game, the 40th of the season. Now, what do I worry about? I don't think this is the kind of clubhouse that we can trust somebody to go say that to him. And that's the kind of clubhouse that you need. That's the kind of clubhouse they have in Houston, which is why they've been consistent like they have for years. I'm not getting on the kid Alvarez like it's not something you do, but I worry it's not something that probably was even noticed except by fans like us. That's a problem, as an example.
Yeah, I'm not going to get that mad at that, but I could see why that could be frustrating watching him, laugh with Maldonado. They might just be boys. I don't know. They might go back.
Yeah, but I don't care. Yeah, but you're about to lose. I want that. The culture of winning is not just a Buck thing, right? That's got to be a Pete Alonso, a Frankie Lindor, and everybody who's a leader in that room thing. And it's harder for pitchers like Verlander and Scherzer because they're out there one every 5 days, and it's a lot of kind of like clicks in a hallway of a high school, in clubhouses between pitchers and position players. But to me right now, the way they're playing, Ottavino was tight on that defensive play. Every play that they make is seemingly a joke. The fact that Omar Navarre has been around the league a long time, is not paying attention and striking out on a pitch clock violation in an at-bat that's important is a disaster. That's a problem that's not just a Buck problem. That's a clubhouse problem. And by the way, that's a new problem. because we didn't think that was an issue before the season. Right now, they don't look like their winning culture is there at all, if we're being fair.
Yeah, the June swoon, 4-13 since that sweep against the Phillies. Mets haven't won a series. The Mets have not won a series on the road, Casey, since that. I believe it's that Dodgers series, the prior to 420. I mean, it's been 2 months, I believe, since this team has won a road series, which is just absolutely inexcusable. I mean, it just cannot happen. And they, you can't even get excited. Monday, Scherzer's great. They dominate. It's an easy win. But until they put a streak together, you can't get excited over individual wins because this team has not put it all together. And that's exactly what they're going to need to do if they want to turn this thing around. I'm not going to say the season's over, but they got to win 9 of 10. They got to win 12 out of 15. They got to get over 500. They got to get to 500 because not only are they struggling, but everyone else in the league is getting better. I mean, everyone in the wild card right now, the Marlins aren't losing. The Giants look tremendous. The Dodgers right now are the third wild card team who you look at as a World Series contender. The Phillies, since that sweep, have been playing great. I mean, everyone above them is playing well, and the Mets are just a sinking ship in the National League right now. And I just don't know what savior there is. I'm not going to say Jose Quintana's coming back. Yay, we don't see McGill because we still got to see the other starters. And what relievers are they going to get at the trade deadline that's going to shake up a bullpen that's just been atrocious from top to bottom? You can't get – I was always like, all right, we'll get a hitter, 2 relievers, get Diaz back in October. Boom, we're fine. Now it looks like you need 6 different players to fix this team.
Yeah, look, I'm not. You're not wrong, and I think that probably is their thought. If we hang in it to kind of where we are now, we'll add some kind of a hitter. No, not going to be anything major, and probably a couple of rentals in the bullpen to add depth. But to your point, how are they stringing those wins together? Who's going to go deep into games, right? How's that going to happen so that you avoid having to go to Leon in a 4th inning, right? Who's been pretty halfway decent actually lately, but was not clearly today, given a couple of home runs. And the other point is when you look at, and this is something people don't talk about enough with this team, because I'll go back to something you said, and it's dead on earlier in this conversation. You talked about the depth, right? And the fact that the Edwin Diaz thing, and you're right. Then you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. Everyone's in the wrong seat on the bus. But it affected them more. I remember talking to Theo Epstein at the Rule 5 draft after they won the World Series, and I asked him the first thing that he was working on that team, and I remember him telling me because it stuck out, he was working on pitchers 7 through 10, starting pitchers 7 through. That was his big concern. Like he was like, we're already on it because the ones who win think about those things. But let's think about what the Mets don't have. What do the Reds have? Dynamic young starters. What do the Marlins have? Dynamic young starters. What does Arizona? Go to all the teams, for all these teams that have played well, that we've seen play the Mets and have had good records in the National League. Jake, they all got dynamic young arms. In relief, the Orioles in the American League, dynamic young arms. In relief and in the starting pitching. Where are the dynamic young arms in this system that have come up for this team? Where are the dynamic young arms? It's age everywhere. Age, and now you're bringing in kids who have not pitched before, but guys who, to your point on Hartway, this guy's he's not changing the world for the Mets. They don't have those kind of guys. That's a major, major hole that was not talked about enough on this roster and in this system going into the year. They don't have young pitchers that can impact your season. They don't.
Grant Hartwig was running the Oval Office, not the 7th inning. I mean, come on.
You're right.
He's not in the right role, and like you said, like we're hoping for the likes. Oh, maybe Steven Ridings will come up and be good. Maybe Alicia Hernandez, who we got in a deal, will be good. They did not do enough across the board depth-wise. And you got to remember, part of that's because the guys they gave away. You gave away a Holderman for Vogelbach. You gave away 3 prospects and an all-star candidate in J.D. Davis for Darren freaking Ruff, which that trade's going to keep coming up because those kids are doing well now. Those are minor leaguers that can maybe play a piece and be these kind of patch guys that you got right now. You gave them up. You made so many bad deals. Obviously, you also lost Bryce Montes de Oca, who people were excited about, to injury. So obviously you had bad luck with that. You had the Quintana injury, you had the Diaz injury, a lot of key injuries, but like we're really hoping Sam Coonrod comes back, or we're hoping
that's what I'm saying.
Like,
but these are retreads.
That Zach Muckenhern is here. Like, these are all retreads and guys.
They're retreads. I'd like to say Muckenhern. I'm keeping it PG rated, but I'd like to say a lot of Muckenherns about what this group, right? What this group is, because let's be fair, Darren Ruff, the 8th inning guy we saw last year, they could probably used him in this game today. Yeah. That's how sad this situation is. It can't. The Diaz thing is allowed to hurt you. It is. That is something that's allowed to hit you, but it's not allowed to be something that's cataclysmic to your staff. But to your point, and I'll go back to it, look, if Senga isn't so often on, if Verlander and Scherzer are doing what you're supposed to, and I go back to the game Scherzer blew where they're a 5-1 lead against the Yankees, right? Just about a week or so ago. How many times there's the stat was just on Twitter. I just saw what the Mets 1-6, I think, in the last 7 games that they've scored 7 runs, I believe is the stat. That is atrocious. That is not Daniel Vogelbach. That is not the lineup from Buck. That's not the defensive miscues necessarily, even though those errors could bring the game closer. That's not having anyone who could keep a lead and go innings, and not having anyone who can go ahead and hold the damage. And you bring up, you think about Trevor Williams, you think about how many guys, right, last year that were different names that they used. They don't have even damage control guys. They are using people on this bus that have seats that should be in double and triple A. And that is a major, major problem. To your point, that is a Billy Eppler and an organizational problem, a Steve Cohen problem, more than it's a Buck Showalter program. Because look, Bruce Bochy, who I love to death and I think is as good as any manager I covered the last 2 decades, if he is putting out Leon and the Brigham and the Hartwig and the guys with Walker and these guys, he's not getting the Astros out either. I'm sorry, he's just not.
Yeah, Trevor Williams, who some Twitter called him baseball's top Catholic player, which I was like, they clearly didn't do their research when they did that. As if you heard, he was sounding off on a matter of topics that I'm not going to get into here. But another guy who the Mets got rid of, who they could probably use as a bridge guy right now, and just Billy Eppler has done a horrific job. And it's like, all right, let's keep him around in hopes that he'll get Shohei Ohtani this offseason. I don't know what Shohei Ohtani, what that relationship with Billy Eppler is. I'm not confident Ohtani's going to want to come here, and I'm pretty confident that the Mets are going to need to get a new GM. Now, there was rumors about Stearns is going to be here as a president. I mean, if Stearns could be the president, GM, do everything, I think the Mets are in good hands. But if Billy Eppler is here this offseason and working on next year's team, Casey, I think the Mets are in a lot of trouble because he has struck out on every trade. He hit a home run on free agents last year. I mean, they all had great years. They've all had down years or been backups like an Escobar this year. But, you know, Billy Epler's track record with this team does not do him well going into this offseason.
Well, first of all, I think Stearns, and leave off the last S for savings because we're not related, but I think he is a guy who I think you would really love to have in this system because he's got a brilliant mind, and he can have a GM under him who is kind of, you know, somebody that he is tutoring into. He's done that role, and who could make the moves, quote unquote, but obviously with Stearns, as you think about, and I'll go back to Theo Epstein, Jed Hoyer, who now is a prominent name and still with the Cubs, but he came under Theo's wing in Boston and in Chicago. So there are situations like that where Stearns would be really the final say. But I would say this about the Billy Eppler thing. You're not wrong, but I think we need to be fair. Did we think Senga was a move? Go back to Twitter that day. I remember it. Every Met fan in the world thought it was the greatest thing that had ever happened, right?
Well, I'm fine with Senga. Senga's been fine. He's got a 3.5 ERA. He's been fine.
So he's right. Okay. So did we think Verlander was the wrong move? Right? They didn't.
No, I mean we loved it at the time.
Years,
yeah.
Right. We loved it at the time. Right. Did we think Scherzer the year before was? Is you understand where I'm coming from? I'm not saying that you're wrong, but we have to be fair. It's not like everything that he has done has failed. It's just when the team fails, we need somebody to blame. And the answer is, which we don't like, it's everyone's fault. It's everyone's fault. It's all the accountability on most of the players, if not all of them. Look, has Marte been what he needs to be and as much as we need it? No. McNeil, we certainly see the struggles that he's having, right? Should you need this much from Tommy Pham? No. But then guess what? Who brought in Tommy Pham? Right, so we can go that way too. Fair. I mean, I'm just saying.
Although it took him 7 weeks, but yes, he finally.
But you understand what you understand. I'm just playing the devil's advocate of the fact that, especially as Met fans, because of the pain we're in, we want to blame one thing. Sometimes it's everything. Right now, the bad news is it's everything. To get on the roll you talked about, they need energy and positive energy, and they need to get that rolling. I thought when we go back 3-4 weeks ago, when they had that 5 games with the Rays and the Guardians, that magical week, as a lot of us thought, they're back in the wild card position. I thought that was it. I thought they got out of their funk. I am surprised. I'm curious if you are. If you go back to how I felt then, I thought that was, we already hit rock bottom and they kind of woke up and figured it out. I almost can't believe we're back even lower than we were before that week. Are you surprised?
Like, I'm shocked.
That was it.
I was at all 5 of those games, and it felt like Christmas. Like it was like a minor Hanukkah. It was like the 5 nights of Hanukkah.
Yes.
I was lighting menorahs. The Mets are scoring runs. They were pitching great.
Me both.
It was tremendous. I was eating lobster rolls. I was in the suite, chill. I was living my best life for that 5 days. Bring back the 5 days, Headless Howie. Headless Howie. Bring back the 5 days in Flushing. Get the SNY feature. The Mets need 55 days in Flushing if they want to turn this around, because they got to play like 650 baseball. Like, it's not even 500. It's not 600. It's coming to the point they got to win about 65+% of their games with how good the NL has been. And something that, it's not really the team's fault, but something around baseball here. The new rules have killed a lot of pitching. A lot of you see these aces, like the no shifts, the bigger bases, the stolen bases. The pitch clock has changed a lot of the way pitchers have worked and the way that Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander have worked for 15 plus years. These new rules are hurting a lot of teams, and the Mets are one of these teams that have been hurt. They haven't been hurt by stolen bases because they've stole 29 straight, the best in ever, and they lead. The one thing they're good at it this year is they lead the league in 90% stolen base percentage. That's one, but these new rules, Casey, I think have affected a lot of teams, but it's really affecting the Mets, and you saw it with the violation by Narvaez today. The lack of the shift. Guys are just crushing these relievers. They're crushing these starters. And I'm not saying that's like the Buck or Eppler's fault, but it is something in the back of my mind I think about when I watch these games. I'm like, I wonder if there was a shift and there wasn't a pitch clock and the games weren't as quick, would the Mets be better? It's definitely made a big difference.
Look, I can give you 2 things. One, I can't believe the stolen base as much as everybody, because I remember when everybody ran like, God bless him, John Olerud. And this team was station to station for like a decade. So I can't even believe what we're watching. The other part is, again, don't hate me, but I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Other teams are dealing with this too. Verlander is a Hall of Famer, right? Max Scherzer, these are Hall of Fame pitchers. Get over it. Like, they got to figure it out. I'm sorry. You can not like it, but you got to adjust to it. If you can adjust to weather, you can adjust to guys who are bad defensively behind you and all the things in their careers that they've had to do, playing with injuries and everything else. My God, deal with it. Sorry.
I agree, but when you're 40 and you got to throw it, 10, 15 seconds quicker, it does get a little tougher on your body when you're, all right, 95.
Yes. Yes.
But they look gassed. Like, Scherzer looks gassed whenever he comes off the mound. Like, he needs oxygen out there.
Also stubborn too. When the slider's not working, he likes to continue to throw it. I mean, he got other things that are going on too, in terms of he not pitching. Instead of adjusting to the stuff he has now, he's still trying to pitch like he's got the stuff from 3-4 years ago. And he hasn't been the same since really his arm went dead at the end of the season with the Dodgers, the year before the Mets even gone. All right. So, like, to me, this is we could do this here. This is what can happen in the clubhouse. I don't like when I hear them complain about the pitch clock, because I think they're looking for excuses. I personally don't like the situation where everybody's making those kind of mistakes, because I'm worried the accountability. Look, if you know anything about anybody watching, this is not high school. This is not college. These guys make a lot of money. When you get to this level, and it's similar in the NBA and talking to players over the years, the accountability comes from your peers. It doesn't come from the manager. Buck Showalter cannot go in like Mike Krzyzewski or Bob Knight and go rip these dudes for all the errors they're making, and then all of a sudden you think they're going to wake up. It'll go the other direction. The way that gets fixed is those guys in the room got to get in their faces. The Lindors got to get in their faces. The other pitchers who've seen the mistake from young pitchers got to say, hey, get over here. The next time that happens, you eat that ball, Walker. I know you're hurt. You don't throw it. Ottavino, you're a veteran. You know better than that. You got to slow that down and make that play. Do you have confidence those things are going on right now in that room? I have zero confidence that's happening. Those things will not work if it's Buck doing it, just to be fair. Those things will work. This is a high-priced team with a lot of veterans. The only people who could put those guys in check are those people. And that's putting each other. They got to have uncomfortable conversations. I wish I heard about some fight in the locker room so we had energy where they're sick and tired and not going to take it anymore. That can't come from an older manager like Buck Showalter, whose best way about him is the fact that he's even keel and he kind of hangs with them. Bob Melvin not ripping the Padres. If they don't come back, it's not going to be because Bob Melvin's not having a speech, because, by the way, his EKG flat like this. So I just think, to me, the player leadership right now in that room, look, I love Pete Alonso, right? And he's all about, like, and I love him, but he gung-ho. Even Steve Phillips said to me a couple of days ago, he used the word, I'll use it, a little hokey sometimes. He's all about everything else, but I want to see him get in somebody else's face in that room that we don't know about and be confident that's happening. That's leadership. It's not just, I love New York, LFGM. It's getting in the faces of those players in that room and saying, we ain't going to effing take this crap no more. That's what I
Yeah,
want.
that's well said. I agree. I don't think there is that guy. I miss the days of Pete Alonso humping rails, but unfortunately he has had nothing to hump because the team's been terrible. But we need more than just him humping rails. He's got to speak up to these guys. And Lindor's never been that kind of leader, that kind of vocal guy. He's the guy, listen, he's always 100% accountable. He'll blame himself if he did something wrong. He'll talk to the media every day, but he isn't that guy. And like you said, Buck is so even keel. I think that's why fans are like, hey, Buck, can you get thrown out of the game? Can you defend your guys? Instead of saying how you battled and how proud you were of them losing a game, like he's got to hold some accountability too. Like, I'm not saying it's all on him, but he's got to change his approach here. He can't be the same old Buck because you're 6 games under. And why we're so freaking mad is how much this team is underachieved from what we expected. It's not like the 2003, 2004 Mets where we were thinking, oh, that team's going to be great. We knew they'd be whatever. This is supposed to be a World Series contender. And instead, they're not even a wild card contender. And that is alarming. And there's just no signs of it. Oh, it's going to happen. It's going to happen here. Oh, we got an off day tomorrow. Maybe Friday against the hot Phillies. Like what? There's no sign that it's going to be fixed. There's no guy coming back from an injury. Edwin Diaz isn't going to be back in July. He's not going to be back till, after Labor Day at the earliest. So there's no real true savior. Like if Diaz came back tomorrow, I'd be like, all right, we got our closer back. Maybe this thing turns around. But Jose Quintana isn't doing that for me. Do you have any semblance that this thing before the deadline turns around, or are you pessimistic Peter like I am right now?
I think are they capable with even the roster we talked about playing better? Yes. Can they be? I look at it this way, right? The rest of because percentages are percentages. I hate to do this, but it is true. They got to win 2 out of 3, 7 out of 10 before I'm worried about them playing 650 ball the rest of the season. Like, let's be fair. Let's get a week and a half stretch, right? Go through the rotation twice. So I look at it the same way I did when we started this conversation. You give me Scherzer, Verlander, Senga, and I know 4 or 5 are going to be wonky, and I get it. And it's going to be with a lot of teams. But you give me those 3 giving you what they're supposed to do. You tell me that McNeil and Marte and Nimmo and Lindor and Alonso, those 5 can play to their capability. And this is a better team than Pittsburgh. It's a better team if that's the case than Miami. It's a better team if that's the case than Cincinnati, than Milwaukee, than I think, to me, San Francisco, even though they played above that. I think this team, if those guys, your stars, are playing to their capability, is better. Are they 650 ball better the rest of the way? I don't know. Are they good enough to play from here on out better than those teams I just mentioned? You're damn right. And I didn't say Phillies. I didn't say Padres, so I think we'll figure it out. I didn't say Dodgers, right? I'm not even going to say Diamondbacks right now. But you only got to be better than the Marlins, everyone else in the Central outside of whoever wins, and San Francisco to at least got a sniff. And I think they can do that the rest of the way. Can they do it to play 650, 700 ball? I have no idea. I mean, I really cannot, to me right now, I don't believe that this team believes in itself. And that is a major freaking problem. And that's an everybody in that room problem. Because you saw the faces of Pham and McNeil. And they're not just wearing, hey, we lost another series. They're wearing worry. They're wearing fear. They're wearing pressure. They're wearing, we stink up the joint right now. And that is a problem. That is the biggest concern for me right now.
There needs some kind of rallying cry, whether it's I like to mention the TJ Rivera rally dildo. They need something in that locker room, whether it's Donnie Stevenson Jr. Well, Donnie Stevenson had a baby like Francisco Lindor. What'd you say? Mauricio, I mean, it's just, I mean, I've been clamoring for a month that he should be here. I'm not even say his name anymore.
It's gonna bolt the energy right in. But here's the problem: is
and
that
tomorrow's an off day. It's a good time to do it. Like,
yeah, here's the problem: you can't and this is no disrespect to Vientos, but to me, I see Mauricio like in the category with Alvarez of like guys who could be game changers for this team moving forward, and you can't bring that guy up and not play him every day. Like, that dude needs to see at-bats, see the ball, and learn how to see the ball better in the outfield or wherever you want to put him, and he needs reps. And he needs reps somewhere. So if it's not the big league level, it's got to be down below. The problem is that when those kids come up to the big league level, we've seen it with Buck, but it's other managers too. Any manager that's old school in any way, and Buck is absolutely in that category some, which is my veterans are the ones I trust when everything is going the wrong direction downhill. You can't let him go 1 for 7 and then bench him. You can't bring him up at all if that's going to be the case. So I don't know about you. I don't believe, based on what I've seen from Eppler and Showalter, they're going to play him every day. And if they're not, you cannot bring him up, because even though Vientos, I'm not so worried about what happens to his psyche back and forth, holes in his swing. I personally, don't think he's that great. But I do think Mauricio is a real talent, and that dude's got to play every single day and get reps in the field at whatever position you want him every single day. And if he can't do that here, they can't call him up.
I'm more worried it's not going to happen now that Vogelbach's had a big week. It's like, listen, Mauricio needs to be here over Luis Guillorme. Luis Guillorme is a part-time defensive player who doesn't hit. He had a home run Saturday, big whoop. Like, you need to have him replace Guillorme. Like, that has to happen. I don't think Vogelbach's getting replaced now that he's starting to hit. But, like, Mauricio's got to be here, and that's a spark. You know, I think Vientos not playing, that's part of why I was like, I don't know if these guys are playing for Buck. Vientos sitting on the bench playing once or twice a week. As Vogelbach was going 0 for 36, like, that frustrates a team when you got a young guy who's not playing. And I agree. I think Mauricio is better than Vientos, and I know his defense is shoddy. I know he's made some errors, but you could put him at DH. You know, you could put him a little bit at third, a late game pinch hitter. He needs to be up here, and maybe that's a spark that the Mets need. Well, Casey Stern, you can follow him on Twitter at Casey Stern. Check out the Unfiltered podcast on YouTube, wherever you get podcasts. And we see you on TBS, TNT days. You're still down in Atlanta near my brother, huh? How's life down there?
It's better for the baseball team that they root for than the one that we root for. I'll tell you that. I still wear my Met hat around with pride, and that maybe that's just because we're all stupid at this point. Because honestly, to your point at the beginning, we can funnel it down this way. We are 3 or 4 weeks of this kind of ball away from this team being unwatchable, and me getting ready for Daniel Jones and hopefully Saquon and the rest of my Giants, because baseball's done. I mean, I will not watch. This team's going to fit. And by the way, you want to talk about ugly. I'm not going back to like playing cards in a clubhouse or Louis Lopez fights and all that. But this may be as ugly in a scenario to watch as we've seen in a long time with the Mets, if they're that bad, because cranky veterans making a lot of money who are used to winning, like Scherzer and Verlander, on a terrible team that punts and is playing a bunch of kids, may be an ugly watch the last couple of months of the season. Let's hope it doesn't get there.
It was an ugly watch today. These Thursday episodes are going to become me trying different chicken parm places in New York City. I mean, I'm very close to that's my middle name. So I'm going to change these shows from Mets talk to food talk if it gets uglier, because I think people would rather see mozzarella dripping out of my mouth than foam from screaming about the Mets and chopping off more bobblehead heads and this stupid thing. Since I brought this thing out, the Mets have been terrible. So this is the horror movie the Mets have been.
You might want to chuck that out. You might want to throw that out.
I'm going to have a burning ceremony for this thing if the Mets become sellers and they give everyone up at the trade deadline. Well, Casey, it was good to have you on. Hopefully we'll have you on again later when the Mets are maybe playing better baseball later in the season.
Anytime, Jake. Be well, buddy. Good to talk to you, bud.